All right, let's start. Hey guys, let's start our today's lecture. Today we are going to continue to talk about symmetric cryptography. All right. And by the way, hopefully you've survived from your house, secure your house, and hopefully you have a good, you achieve very well for your house and your past assignment works very well. And today we're going to continue to talk about this symmetric cryptography system, some interesting things inside, and you will expect your next assignment to be released probably the end of this week or early next week. And we will again, send, you will see the assignment page in our course website. If you still don't know the course website, good luck with your previous 2 assignments. But I suppose you already know about that. And then also, we will send an announcement from Piazza that the new assignment will be released. Okay, cool. All right, let's continue. So if you still remember last time, like a week ago, we talked about DAS, right? We talked about how DAS works, and basically you can consider DAS as something that has, first of all, symmetric key, meaning that the encryption and the decryption is using the same key. And the way that it works is that it first comes with a key, and then using this key, expand the key to multiple subkeys, right? And then for those subkeys, you're gonna use one at each round. And then for each round, you're gonna have these keys and then combine that with your plain text together. If you're doing encryption, right? So you're gonna put this in the plain text, mix them all together using XOR, and then using this one-way function, and then combine with them together. And then you do this round by round, like for 16 rounds. And after that, you will be able to get the encrypted ciphertext. And in a very similar fashion, you can convert it from the ciphertext back to plain text using, like Festo network or like DAS network, one-way function, and you will be able to decrypt it and then guess what you want. But then for DAS, I mean, it's great, and it has been used for real-world practice a long time ago. I would say like 20 years ago. Until they found that there can be some issues with this crypto system, meaning that someone can actually attack it. And then last time we talked about the possible ways that we can attack DAS, but we don't talk about that in a lot of details. So today, let's just recall what we have talked about for DAS, and starting from there, we're going to talk about more interesting thing about like, what kind of DAS, or is there any improvement that we can do to mitigate this DAS attack, and is there any other interesting attack that can targeting those mitigated like DAS schemes. So let's first start from DAS again, and then think about how can we attack DAS, okay? So before we talk about how to attack, let's first talk about the so-called attack model, or say a threat model, what we allow attackers to do, what we disallow attackers to do in this attacking scenario, okay? So suppose that the attacker, or say now, let's think about you yourself as attacker now. So suppose that you already know that the current cipher or crypto system being used is DAS, okay? So you know that this is DAS algorithm. Someone is using DAS to encrypt and decrypt. Also, you know the entire encryption and decryption algorithm. So you know those one-way functions that are being used, although you don't know about the key, but you know what kind of one-way functions it's using. And also those are number of rounds and the way that they act sorted together, every piece of details about the algorithm, okay? But you just don't know the key. You don't know the secret key that are used between the two parties. However, you have a lot of ciphertext and the plain text pairs. So it's like you are someone sitting in the middle between this communication of these two guys, and you already capture, or say you eavesdropped all the communication messages. So you have those pairs somehow. You know that, okay, for this particular plain text, this guy send this corresponding ciphertext, but you don't know about the key. And your goal is to recover the key so that in the future, you can pretend to be someone and then send the encrypted or decrypted messages, okay? All right, just give me a second. Let me admit more of our friends coming in. Okay, so now the question is, given what you could do as a hacker, how can we come up with an attack that will recover the key given pairs of plain text and ciphertext, okay? And this is called known plain text attack, meaning that you know about this plain text already, and then you know the corresponding ciphertext, and the goal for the attacker is to recover the key, okay? So now let's talk about this actual attack. So let's first, before we talk about the actual attack, now we just start with I would say lemma or something that just like everyone all agree on, okay? Which is that if there is a plain text already, we call it M. And then if there are different keys, say there are two different keys, K1 and K2, if we use two different keys to encrypt a same plain text, then how likely, or say it's likely that the ciphertext will be the same, okay? And the answer is no, or say very unlikely. So it's very unlikely that given the two different keys, the corresponding ciphertext of the same plain key will be the same. And we're going to use this property to support our attack, our brute force attack later on. And here is the approach. Suppose that we have a message, we already know the plain text again, because we know that this is known plain text attack, so already know the pairs of the plain text and the ciphertext. So now let's suppose that we have this message already, and this is plain text. And also we have the ciphertext already. We just call it C1, C2, C3, C4. And keep in mind that this is block cipher, meaning that we need to cut the messages into like blocks, smaller pieces, and then we can get according ciphertext based on each of the small pieces, each of the block, okay? So here, what we are going to do is that we're going to just enumerate the key. So we know that the key is 56-bit, right? So we're going to just try that bit by bit, one by one. Just give me a second. All right. So 1 second, guys, sorry. Okay. So we're going to try those keys bit by bit. And then for this specific trial, what we're going to do is we're going to use this DES algorithm to encrypt the key and encrypt the key, and encrypt the plain text. And then we'll get the corresponding ciphertext. And because we know the paired already, so we're going to just compare the corresponding ciphertext to the ciphertext that we already have and see if this is the same. And if it is the same, that there is a very, very high chance that this key is the right key. And then what we could do is we can just try 3 consecutive blocks. Actually, it doesn't have to be consecutive, but like we can just try 3 different blocks. And once we find a key that can encrypt the plain text correctly for 3 times, it's almost guaranteed that this is the right key. So we can, in this way, we can brute force it and get it to the right key. And as you know, because we have to try all different keys. So we have to try that for 2 to the 56 times. And however, given the current like parallel computing, those power, brute forcing and get that key is not that hard. And if you look at my chart over here, you see that in year 2006, you probably only need 7 days to find the right key. And it will be even less now, since it's already 14 years passed after 2016. Sorry, 2006. Actually, it's not even 14. The 16 years passed already. So yeah, being able to recover that key is straightforward, like brute force. The algorithm itself is not complex, and it's relatively reasonable, or say feasible now, given the current computing power. Okay. And now we know that this is not good, right? Also, we can conclude that in this case, if we have a 56-bit ciphers or 50-bit cipher, I mean, whatever cipher with the key, it probably you don't want to use it, because parallel computing already enable us to brute force or to break a key or break a cipher system very easily. Okay, so now let's think about, what about we do like 2 deaths? Meaning that in this case, then we're going to use 2 keys, 2 56-bit keys altogether for one cipher system. And if that's the case, then you will have to brute force 112-bit keys. And I want to ask you guys if this is secure or not. And before we talk about if it is secure or not, let's just first define the way that we're going to use for 2 deaths, okay? Okay, so suppose that we have 2 keys, and K1, K2, each of the keys do 56-bit, okay? And the way that it works is that we're going to start with a plain key, which is M, all right? And then start from that plain key, we'll first use that to encrypt it. So we get a one-time encrypted message. And that encrypted message will be used as the input of the second encrypted message, okay? So it's like the plain text for the second encryption. So we're going to pass that to the second E, and then we're going to encrypt again, and then we get the ciphertext, all right? And in this case, we will have, 2 keys, and in total, that's going to be 112 bits. All right. So in this case, then you may think that actually, if someone's going to break this, he has to enumerate all those bits, which is 112, and the complexity will increase from 2 to 56 to 2 to 112. All right. But actually, this is not, I mean, this is a possible attacking scheme for sure, but there is another less complicated, or say like, more efficient way, which makes 2 deaths also vulnerable, okay? And I want you guys to think about that. I will give you a couple of minutes to think about what are other alternative ways that we can attack 2 deaths with much less resources, or more, more simple complexity. All right, and in the meanwhile, I am gonna answer the questions from Zoom. There was a clarification question. So you use keys to encrypt plain text to get ciphertext? Yes. So those are the keys that you're used to get the ciphertext. And you see that from 2 deaths, we have actually a kind of a 2 ciphertext. The first ciphertext is like an intermediate result that you're going to be used for the second times of encryption. All right. Anyone have any clue about how can someone possibly attack 2 deaths? Yes.
take a ciphertext and then try to decrypt it back into plain text just from one of the steps. Like backwards to take like a mid-way ciphertext actually.
Sure, which one? You want to turn back one slide? You mean this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this, I mean, inversing it, like reversing it, it's going to be very hard for that because if that is reversible, then someone can also reverse like a one dash, right? And we know that because of the one-way function in the Festo network or in the DAS network, it's going to be very hard for us to recover this one-way function. And that's why they call it one-way function, right? So reversing is almost, or say it's not computational feasible at this point. All right. But this is good thought. This is good thinking. Let's continue. All right, so here is one way that we can reduce the complexity from 2 to the 112 to something much smaller. Okay, comparing to 2 to the 112 for sure. So let's think about this. So let's have a meet in the middle attack in the sense that we know that K1 and K2, they are like kind of independent. They are not related to each other, all right? So what about we just enumerate K1 and we enumerate K2 separately and independently. So it's not putting K2 under K1, but instead just have K1, mutate them, brute force it, and then K2, mutate it, brute force it, and then see if we can find some common out from encrypted of K2 and common plain text from the back of the E of K1 so that it can be meet in the middle. And to be more specific, let's think about this. So let's first start with building a table. And then in this table, there are two columns. One column is the encrypted message for different value of K2, okay? And the other column is the decrypted message for every possible value of K1. So we have encrypted value from K2 and decrypted value from K1. So we have like two columns over there. And then for each column, there are 2 to the 50 entries because we're going to enumerate the value of K1 and K2. Okay? And then, and the next step, we're going to just scan these two tables to find if there are any values that are in common. Basically, we want to find somewhere right in the middle such that the message after the encryption of K2 is equal to the ciphertext that is decrypted by K1, okay? And then in this case, we will find a particular, or maybe some of the candidates of those K1 and K2 that makes this two columns of the tables like two entries that meet in the middle, all right? And then we're gonna test those values one by one until we find the case that can constantly giving us the correct value for the plain text and the ciphertext. And then in this case, we don't really need to try 2 to the 112 times, right? Because we only try K1 for 2 to the 56 times. And also for K2, that's another 2 to the 56 times. So we just add this 2 times all together, that will be, like 2 to the 57 times. But also, like, there is a time that we need to compare this to, like, those values. And for that one, you could probably have like log of 2 to the 56 times. So in total, that's going to be much smaller than 2 to the 112 times. And in this case, that we can break this 2-dash algorithm. Okay. And then given the fact that we know that 2 does won't work, it's still breakable, right? Then can we do something else? And this comes to it's natural, like if 2 times of that doesn't work, let's do 3 times, okay? So suppose that we have, again, like we have a key, right? And then we have like 3 56-bit keys. And what we're gonna do for 3 DAS is that we're gonna have 1 key to encrypt that, and then have another key use it to decrypt this previous encrypted message, and then passing it to the third key, and then we're gonna do this encryption again. And in total, we have the key in a size of 168 bits. But then also, because we have to do that for 3 times, encryption, decryption, and encryption again, that's gonna be 3 times slower than the original does. However, the good thing is that turns out that it is much more secure than like single death, and also of course 2 deaths. And the simple attack will cost the time, or say the complexity of 2 to the 118, which is very long, which is like computationally acceptable for like a crypto attack, meaning that it's going to be taking a very long time to attack, so that like it is feasible for a secure crypto system. Okay. All right. So now I have a brain teaser for you guys. Why not, like right now when I talk about 3 deaths, I told you that you want to start with encryption and then decryption, right? And then encryption again. Why don't we just make it encryption, 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 instead of encryption, decryption, encryption? Can you think about that? And I can tell you that this is nothing about security. This is more about, you know, something practice, like EDE is going to be more practical or more reasonable comparing to EEE, like encrypting for 3 times. And can you guys think about the reason why? No? Yes?
Does it get too unreasonable to attack-wise?
Just again, can it?
Does it get too unreasonable to decrypt if you just
Well, not really, because someone can still decrypt it in the middle, or someone can still decrypt the message after you do that for 3 times. And as I said, this is not really because of security. It's because of something like in practice, a practical common thing. And actually, this is because when people create 3 DAS, that was the time that that's already been like popularly used. So they want to make sure that when 3 DAS being applied to practice, it's still going to be able to compatible to the original 1-time DAS. And for triple DAS, it's actually backward compatible to single-time DAS, in a way that if you just make K2 and K3 the same, right? And then you encrypt and decrypt again, it's equivalent to doing nothing. So in this case, if there is still like someone else still using DAS, and they can just keep using their DAS. So think about this. Think about the the scenario that there is Alice and Bob, and Alice already have triple DAS installed in her computer, but then Bob still using the previous like 1-time DAS. But Alice still wants to talk to Bob, and Alice wants to be able to talk to Bob in the DAS way, like a single DAS way. However, Alice already have triple DAS installed. So the way that current triple DAS is designed still support Alice to talk to Bob using the plain or the 1-time DAS. because Alice can just specify K2 and K3 to be the same. It can be whatever value, right? As long as it's same. Using triple DES, if you do encryption and then decryption with the same key, it's equivalent that you just like convert from plain text to plain text, right? And then you have like the third time DES, it's gonna be equal, or it's gonna be equivalent to one time DES, and then you can still use that send messages to Bob. And this is the reason that why for triple DES it's designed as EDE instead of EEE. And actually EEE, like from security's perspective, it is doable, it is secure. It's just like from the engineering or from the like common practice perspective, it's not gonna be as good as triple DES in terms of backward compatibility to previous crypto scheme. Okay. All right. So that's all about DES. We're done with DES. And as I said, DES is something that is not quite secure. And that's why government seeks for an alternative solution that can replace DES for standard use. And yes, 3DES is somehow considered to be secure, but it is not slow. And if you remember previously, I talked about those like throughput. So for encryption, you also hope that you have a high performance when performing encryption and decryption. And 3DES is not that efficient. And also this is part of a reason why people want to seek for an alternative crypto system for symmetric encryption or decryption. And this comes to AES. So the story for AES is that starting from 1997, NIST published a request for proposal looking for a new approach for symmetric crypto. And then in year 1998, there are 15 submissions in terms of this new crypto. And in 1999, NIST chooses 5 finalists. And 2000, NIST decided to be, this written down as the final AES standard. And for AES, it can be in key sizes of 128, 192, and 256 bits. And then the block size is somehow constant. It's like 16 bytes, which is 128 bits. So if you remember, we talked about DES and then we talked about fast networks, right? So we talked about the way that can convert a one-way function to something that actually like reversible in the sense that you can encrypt and decrypt messages using a one-way function. So AES is based on another idea, like instead of using fast networks, it has a so-called substitution permutation networks. So it's still rounded. So it has like key expansion phase, and it's gonna do those like operation by multiple rounds. But in each of the round, instead of using fast network, it uses substitution permutation networks. So that is some alternative steps of substitution, like the S box that we talk about from fast network, and permutation. And so far, AES is known to be say like computationally infeasible to break, meaning that someone, if they want to break brute force, they can still brute force it and break it, but it's gonna be taking a very, very long time. So that's why we consider that is feasible, meaning that this is AES is secure enough for us to use in daily practice. And you can get more details about this algorithm from either just Wikipedia. I mean, Wikipedia give you a high level, but a little bit more specific description for the algorithm of AES. And also you can check the crypto hack challenges, and it has a very nice and also hands-on tutorial about AES. And in fact, our assignment will also cover AES. So I would say, it won't be like a waste of effort or anything if you want to look into AES now or soon, because in our assignment, you will have programming tasks that will handle or implement the AES algorithm. So just give you guys a heads up. All right. And then that's all about the first part of block cipher. So now we have talked about how we should encrypt and decrypt one block, right? So we already cut those messages into smaller pieces. We call each unit a block. And then we talk about how to encrypt and decrypt those blocks. All right. And then now let's talk about how can we operate on multiple blocks, because we know that sometimes we just have very long message and we need to be able to encrypt them all or decrypt them all right? So first thing that coming out into our mind is that why don't we just have plain text, cut it into blocks, and then for each of the block, we're gonna just do encryption like this, right? So we have the key, and then we just encrypt this block by block. And then later on, when we have the ciphertext for each block, we then just concatenate them together and we get the final ciphertext. Well, the problem here is that if we are going to encrypt a block in this manner, then every block with the same ciphertext will be encrypted to the same ciphertext, right? So same plain text will go to or will get same ciphertext. And this might be an issue because in this case, if we're going to encrypt something, you'll see like this, right? So it's like if we take the pixel of a picture, say, and then we're going to encrypt it. And because those same pixel will lead to same encrypted value, you will still be able to tell like the figures from like the higher perspective. Although that each of the pixel is encrypted, you can still looking at the difference of those pixels and then tell what exactly it is, right? And that's the bad thing of which is so-called like ECB, like a normal or say in a vanilla way of encrypting each block without putting something like changing over there. All right, so then how we're going to mitigate that? We can mitigate it using another scheme, which is called Cipher block chaining. And in this setup, you will still have multiple blocks all together. But then later on, when we do like per block encryption, we're going to combine this with the previous encryption. So for example, here, let's start with the first block. And then we're going to use this key. And then we're going to have this encrypted message, just the ciphertext, right? And then we're going to use this ciphertext as part of the input of our next block. All right. And the way that it works is that we're going to XOR the ciphertext, the previous ciphertext, with the current plain text block. And then we're going to encrypt that with the key using DES or whatever algorithm. You can also use AES instead. And then we can get a next ciphertext. And we're going to just do this one by one. And we get the ciphertext. Okay. And now, even more complicated, we can add a so-called IV here. It is called initial vector. And because of this initial vector, it's guaranteed that even for the first block, you won't get the same ciphertext, right? So it's like every time, if you're given the same key, and if you are going to use the same key to decrypt, or sorry, to encrypt the same plain text, same block, you won't get the same ciphertext because of this IV initial vector. And this guarantees the security. You won't be able to get something like the picture that we just showed before. Okay, so far so good? Okay. Then the question is, what if the initial vector is predictable? And I want you guys to think about this for a little second. And when I say IB is predictable, it means that, you can predict what is the next IB is. And then although you don't know about the key, can you somehow generate an attack that can help you tell the plain text, or can like help you tell what is the decrypted message given some known encrypted messages? I mean, when I'm looking at the message from Zoom, there was a question about ECB. So people ask if ECB encrypts the message or not. And I would say yes and no. So the thing is, ECB itself is not an encryption algorithm. What it does is, an algorithm that try to put blocks all together. So you can consider ECB as something to organize the chain of the blocks. And now we know that the way that it organizes those chains is not secure. It can still leak those information, but itself is not an encryption approach, and DAS is the encryption approach. And you have a question?
What does ECB stand for?
That's a good question. I think ECB is something that, let me check. I actually can't remember that. Let me just search it real quick and I'll get back to you. I can't remember the complete spelling for ECB. I think it's something like extended chain something, but real quick. Oh, and so it is electronic code book. Okay, let me go back to CBC, Cipher blockchaining. Okay, so let's start to talk about the possible attack for CBC with the like predictable initial vector. All right, so let's now just suppose that we have a crypto system, like it is something that someone can query their plain text or ciphertext from there. Okay, and I suppose that there is an attacker, we just call it evil, and the attacker can predict what is the next initial vector given the current like initial vector or something. Basically, he has this superpower that can know what is going to be the next initial vector used in from the crypto system. Okay, and also evil knows about the current initial vector and the ciphertext. So for example, like this. So suppose that evil knows that the crypto system is going to send something out, like a ciphertext. It could be either to pass or fail. Think about, there is a student getting his exam result from the crypto system. Like I am sending the encrypted message to the student in terms of the student exam result. It could be either pass or fail. And then by the time that I send this message out to the student, I need to let the student know about this initial vector, because the students need to use this to start to, decrypt the message, right? And also, I will give the student the encrypted message of either the student passes or fail the exam. All right. And now, let's suppose that evil, as the bad guy, he can ask the crypto system to encrypt or decrypt some messages. Okay. And then the question here is that, can evil, given the fact that evil knows about IV2, and then can evil know which message was sent previously when the crypto system sent this two message out? It could be either C0 or C1, right? But then from the outsider's perspective, he will only see IV1 and a combination of this message, like an encrypted message. So he doesn't really know if it's pass or fail. But then now when evil starts to query to the crypto system, after the crypto system send this specific message out, which means that now when evil sends a query to the crypto system, and then when the crypto system getting back to evil, he's going to use IV2 as his initial vector. Okay. And now the question is, for evil, can he generate a special message and ask the crypto system to encrypt this message? Can evil use this message to tell whether or not the previous C0 or C1 is the message that crypto system sent before? Does everyone understand the current question? Yes? No? Yes? I saw someone nodding head. Okay. All right. Then I will give you some minutes to think about how you can crack it. And a hint here is that, since evil wants to recover or wants to find the previous message, the current structured was a well-created message, probably is going to be something that is related to IV1, right? And then the question here is, how should he struct the current, like the new plain text, asking crypto system to encrypt so that he can get something that is related to the previous encrypted message? All right. Any thought? It doesn't have to be the exact answer, but just like any random thought in your mind. Yes, please.
Possibly a good idea to have the message that you send be binary XOR operation, and we can tell what operation is being done to binary versus
Yes, that's the right direction. All right. No more? Let me start to talk about that then. So this is so-called chosen plain text attack. Okay. And this means that evil, which is the attacker, is gonna craft a very special message and then ask the crypto system to encrypt this message. So that's why it's called chosen plaintext. Basically, the attackers chooses the specific plaintext and then sending this to crypto system and ask the crypto system to encrypt. And then based on the encrypted result, the attacker decides, on or the attackers infers the information from this encrypted message, and such as the information of what is the previously sent information means, like recover the previous encrypted message. So here is how it works. I know this might looks a little bit like messy, but I will explain this step by step. So remember that at the beginning, the crypto system send either C0 or C1, right? So the crypto system sends one of those two possible messages. And now for evil, what he could do is he can have this message to be sent as the plain text. Basically, evil tells the crypto system that, hey, can you please help me encrypt this message? And because evil knows about IV1, right? That comes from this previous message. And also evil knows IV2 because we know that IV2 is predictable. So evil can just combine the word pass, XOR that with IV1 and IV2, okay? So evil can just combine this message all together and send it to crypto system and ask crypto system to encrypt it. And crypto system is going to use IV2, XOR that with this plain message, right? So it has this plain text XOR IV2. And then because IV2 has been XOR for twice, in this case, what crypto system is really doing is to encrypt pass, like this message, XORed with IV1, right? So it's like IV2 got canceled out completely. And this is exactly because evil, the attacker, can predict IV2. And that's why he can craft a message that after this XOR with IV2, it will be canceled out, like IV2 no longer taking any effectives. And then very interestingly, we have this new plain text that is exactly the same as the previous plain text. And then in this case, then crypto system, once it's encrypted, you will get IV2 along with this entire encrypted message that should be identical to one of those previous messages, right? So by the time that evil receives this message, evil then can tell, or say can compare this encrypted message to the previous received message. And if it's the same, then it means that, okay, the previous student passed the exam. And if it's not the same, then evil can just, infer that means that the previous student fails the exam, right? So this is a very simple case to show that someone can infer the previous message based on the predictable IV2. And also similarly, if it's not just pass and fail, right? If it's something more diverse, like I just talked to one, for example, I just sent a student a score, or I talked to someone with some like English word, he can also make this attack happen by just asking the crypto system for more messages to encrypt, right? And then because evil just keep knowing the predictable next initial vector, he can just keep using IV2, IV3, IV4, etc. to keep encrypting with all the possible messages, right? And then crypto system will send him back those encrypted, all the possible messages. And again, he's going to compare that with the previous, encrypted message and then get the right plain text. Okay. Does it make sense? Is it clear enough? Right? Cool. Yeah. I mean, this is something like, this is the interesting part of crypto system or cryptography. Like, it's like brain teasers to you guys. You can construct something that is simple, but can effectively break the crypto system. So that is a very interesting thing. And also, I hope that this give you a, or convince you, for more secure or advanced blockchain, not blockchain, like the block ciphering, the way that the chain like CBC, you have to make sure that the IV, like initial vector, is something that is not predictable, right? So you need to make sure that first, you don't want to release your IV to other people unless you already like encrypt it. Also, you don't want the other people to predict the future IV that you're going to use for your encryption or decryption. Okay. All right. So that's all the things about symmetric crypto. All right. And to as a recap, first of all, we talk about stream cipher. We also talk about block cipher, right? And then for stream cipher, we know that like one-time padding, if you still remember, right? Like you every time you change a key and then you XOR the key with, well, actually, you don't really change the keys. Like you start from a key and then you use this key and then you expand it to something that is like random, not predictable, and then you use that to XOR with the plain text, like the bit of the plain text bit by bit, and then you will get the cipher text. And it is proven that one-time padding is secure, but it is secure only if the pseudo-random generator, like here is G of K, which is the stream that is going to be XOR with the plain text, is unpredictable. And also, of course, the key stream has to be as long as the plain text so that we can make sure that every bit of the plain text will be XORed with a specific key stream, right? Like a specific bit in the key stream. Okay. All right, so that's stream cipher. And then we have a block cipher. So for block cipher, the way that it works is that we will cut the entire message into multiple blocks, and then we decrypt or encrypt each of the block, and then we just put them together. But the way that we put them together is not really just concatenate them together. We need a like more advanced or more sophisticated way to merge them together, or say combine them together, so that it's not going to be leaking the side channel-ish information, like those images that I just showed you guys, right? So we want to make sure that even for the same plain text and then the same key, every time that we encrypt it, it will have a different value. So we talk about DES for a single block. We talk about, DES is based on Fessel network. It is rounded, and then for each round, it is a Fessel network, and the Fessel network enables one-way function reversible, basically. So it's like no one without the key, no one be able to reverse the one-way function. But as long as the key stands, like everyone or anyone else can reverse the encrypt function, aka decrypt it, right? And that's the smart part for the Fessel network. But also we know that DES is known to be vulnerable to brute force attack, and especially for like short key, like 56-bit key. Given the current computing power, it's going to be very easy to break it, right? And also, then what about 2DES? What about we just enlarge the key and then encrypt it twice? Turns out that it's not going to work because someone can just like sit in the middle and then do this like meet in the middle attack, which is not, it's a little bit more complicated than a single DES, but still not complicated enough, and it's still like doable from a attacker's perspective. And that's why we come up with like 3DES, right? But then 3DES is slow, performance-wise it's not good, although actually 3DES still actively used right now, like for many like bank transaction, they're still using 3DES, like just something that doesn't require like high performance, still capable. 3DES is still capable of doing practical work. It's still considered to be secure. But then for some more, like for other scenarios that require a better throughput, a better performance, there is a new crypto system called AES has been very extensively used. right? And then those is like the cutting edge state of art of symmetric cryptography. And then we talk about how to put those block message all together. We talk about ECB, electric, hold on, actually I forgot again. Oh, electronic code book, right? So electronic code book, which is just have those block by block encryption and then concatenate them together. We know that it's not gonna work. It's vulnerable. And then we talk about CBC. Okay, that is a better way that we combine those blocks together with something called initial vector, IV. However, you cannot release, like you cannot make the IV predictable, and someone else or the attacker should not be able to predict this IV. Otherwise, he can craft this like so-called chosen plain text to recover the message that you sent before. Okay. Yeah. So that's everything about symmetric cryptography. And then starting from the next time, we're going to talk about asymmetric cryptography. And that's it all for today. Thank you, everyone. One second, let me just answer the question real quick on Zoom.
I would